Johnny Carson's 5 bitterest showbiz feuds. For 3 decades, Johnny Carson built one of television's most perfectly polished reputations. As the face of The Tonight Show, he radiated charm, humor, and a calm presence that made millions tune in night after night. But the pleasant host America adored concealed a far more intricate reality, one driven by grudges and guarded emotions. Behind the curtain was a man known for his razor-sharp memory and enduring resentments. Quote, "Johnny never forgot a slight," recalled an NBC executive who worked closely with him through the 70s and 80s. On camera, he seemed endlessly gracious, laughing with guests as if he loved them all. That was the magic of his performance. Off camera, however, few understood his capacity for deep, freezing hostility toward anyone who betrayed him. Once you landed on Carson's bad side, there was almost no way back. His ability to separate that bitterness from his professional demeanor made those grudges legendary. Unlike today's stars who vent online, Carson kept his anger hidden, confiding only in his most trusted circle. His silence gave those tensions even greater power. Today, we're revisiting 5 of Carson's fiercest rivalries, the kind that shaped his personal and professional legacy. These weren't minor disagreements. They were relationships that dissolved into cold animosity, sometimes lasting a lifetime. Mostly concealed from the public during his reign as the king of late night, these clashes reveal a far more guarded and formidable man than the smiling figure audiences thought they knew. And we'll start with perhaps his most painful fallout, with the protege whose decision cut deeper than any insult, a wound that would never fully close, the one name reportedly unspoken by Carson until the day he died: Joan Rivers. The bitter divide between Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers remains one of television's most infamous rifts. What began as a mentor-protege bond ended in an irreparable split that stunned the entertainment world. What made it especially tragic was how genuine their early affection had been. Quote, "She was his discovery," remembered a veteran Tonight Show producer. Johnny didn't often take newcomers under his wing, but Joan was different. He gave her coveted appearances, offered private guidance, and publicly called her the heir apparent to The Tonight Show. This wasn't casual praise. He truly believed in her talent and worked to push her forward. Rivers first graced The Tonight Show in 1965 and became a standout favorite, soon serving as Johnny's regular guest host. That role made her one of comedy's brightest rising stars. Beyond TV slots, Carson personally coached her act, connected her with industry heavyweights, and championed her career when few women in comedy found support. Quote, "Johnny built her platform," said a former staffer, and she was fully aware of that. They shared mutual respect and even a familial closeness. Rivers was, in many ways, the professional daughter he never had. Which is why what happened in 1986 blindsided him completely. When Rivers accepted Fox's offer to launch a competing late-night show without telling Carson first, it was the ultimate betrayal. Quote, "He saw it as a stab in the back," confirmed an NBC executive from that era. Competing was one thing, keeping him in the dark was another. He learned the news from the media, not from her. Carson's reaction was swift and final. Rivers was permanently banned from The Tonight Show, a ban that survived through Jay Leno's entire run and wasn't lifted until Jimmy Fallon welcomed her back in 2014, nearly a decade after Carson's passing. He never exchanged another word with her. Quote, "She tried, calls, letters, everything," said a close friend. He wouldn't budge. Even her husband's death in 1987 didn't move him to respond. Rivers herself admitted as much in later interviews. She said, "He never forgave me." She insisted she'd tried to call before the news broke, but Carson's team denied it outright. privately, Carson's bitterness was clear. Quote, "She didn't just betray me," he once told a confidant. "She twisted the knife." Coming from a man so disciplined about his emotions, the remark spoke volumes. What made their rift truly remarkable was its permanence. Most Hollywood feuds fade, but this one didn't. Rivers became the only Tonight Show alum ever blacklisted for life. It was proof of how seriously Carson took loyalty and how unforgiving he could be when it was broken. Quote, "Carson could overlook almost anything," recalled one associate. "But if you betrayed his trust, that was the end." Rivers' departure became the defining example of his lifelong grudge. Emotionally, it was as though she had ceased to exist. That cold detachment only reinforced the legend of Carson as a man who, behind his charming exterior, demanded loyalty above all else and never forgot those who crossed him. Next, David Letterman. Johnny Carson's relationship with David Letterman was far more tangled. Here, admiration and frustration coexisted uneasily. Carson liked Dave, his sarcasm, his wit, and his understanding of late-night rhythm. He often praised Letterman and trusted him as a guest host, which said a lot. But everything changed when Carson announced his retirement in 1992. NBC's choice to replace him with Jay Leno instead of Letterman set off a media storm that Carson quietly hated. Letterman's open fury toward NBC and Leno turned what should have been a graceful handoff into a public spectacle. "It became a circus," said one insider. "Dave was angry, Jay stayed silent, and Johnny was caught in the middle." For a man who valued dignity and discretion, the public chaos surrounding his farewell was deeply uncomfortable. Carson's reaction to the whole affair spoke volumes about who he truly was. Even though he personally leaned toward Letterman as the ideal successor, he chose not to comment publicly, staying above what he viewed as an embarrassing media circus. His frustration wasn't directed at Letterman's disappointment itself. He completely related to it and even shared that sentiment, said a producer familiar with both men. What truly upset him was the way Letterman chose to express that disappointment, turning a private professional matter into a public display that, to Carson, disrespected The Tonight Show's legacy. People close to Carson recalled that he particularly bristled at Letterman painting himself as a wronged man during the transition. He couldn't stand the theatrics or the self-pity, said a longtime associate. Carson belonged to an era that valued keeping professional frustrations out of public view. Letterman's nightly jabs about the situation struck Carson as petty and ultimately counterproductive. The tipping point came when the jokes and bitterness kept flowing long after Letterman had joined CBS and launched his own show. What started as understandable hurt feelings turned, in Carson's eyes, into an unhealthy fixation that dulled Letterman's comedic sharpness. The breaking moment arrived when Carson realized Letterman wasn't going to let it go, a close friend recalled. Carson reportedly remarked, "It stopped being funny and became sad." To him, that was the worst verdict imaginable. When bitterness replaces humor, the spirit of comedy itself is lost. What makes the Carson-Letterman dynamic fascinating is how it exposed two sides of Johnny's personality. Publicly, he stayed neutral. Privately, his actions quietly showed where his loyalties lay. He demonstrated that loyalty most clearly by sending Letterman jokes after retirement and by making his only post-Tonight Show late-night appearance on Letterman's CBS program, not on Leno's. Though Carson never openly endorsed anyone, those choices revealed everything, said a television executive familiar with the feud. By slipping jokes to Letterman and showing up on his stage, he voiced his opinion without uttering a word. It was a textbook example of Carson's subtle genius, letting behavior convey what words never could. The way he navigated the Letterman-Leno feud captured his layered personality, a man capable of affection and criticism in equal measure. He could admire Letterman's talent, yet disapprove of his public tantrums. He could root for him privately, but reject the drama surrounding him. That duality is exactly what kept Carson such a mysterious and compelling figure long after he left television.
Now you have to write every day. That's going to be the most fun. Sitting down on Monday afternoon and figuring out what I'm going to do Monday night.
That's the fun about it.
That sense of quiet control defined him. Jay Leno. Johnny Carson's connection with Jay Leno might have been the most professionally charged rivalry of his final years. It was a situation where his personal misgivings had to be hidden behind the decorum required of The Tonight Show's departing host. Carson never believed Leno was the right person to carry the torch, said an NBC insider involved in the handover talks. Within the industry, that was common knowledge. Carson had a clear image of what the show should remain and who could preserve its essence. Though he never stated it outright in public, those who worked with him knew Leno wasn't his chosen heir. The tension showed in how Carson handled their professional connection. Even when Leno served as permanent guest host, a role that often led to succession, Carson kept his distance, unlike with others he had personally mentored. He never personally asked Jay to guest host, said one longtime producer. That distinction mattered. Carson always handpicked the people he trusted to occupy his chair. Leno's spot came from network arrangement, not personal invitation. And that said everything inside the show's hierarchy. Carson's unease with Leno came down to clashing comedic philosophies. Privately, he told colleagues that Leno lacked the qualities he believed essential for a Tonight Show host. He thought Jay wasn't warm enough and relied on cheap humor, said a writer from Carson's final seasons. Carson felt a host should be someone audiences felt comfortable welcoming into their homes, a blend of humor and humanity. Leno, he thought, had the jokes but missed the connection. When NBC crowned Leno instead of Letterman, the decision, made by executives, not Carson, angered him deeply, though he kept it to himself. He was livid but silent, recalled an NBC executive. Carson knew that speaking out would harm the very show he'd built. His quiet restraint, however, spoke even louder. In the years that followed, that silence became its own symbol. Carson set boundaries that insiders understood as deliberate signals of disapproval. The clearest one? He never appeared on Leno's Tonight Show, yet made a headline-making appearance on Letterman's CBS stage. In Hollywood terms, that wasn't scheduling, it was a statement. Carson was sending a message without saying a word. After retirement, his actions spoke louder than ever. Carson secretly sent monologue jokes to Letterman, a gesture he'd never extended to Leno. He'd fax material to Dave now and then, said a former Late Show staffer. Though few knew at the time, those jokes revealed exactly where Johnny's heart and respect lay. Privately, his remarks about Leno could be brutally honest. One old friend recalled Carson calling Leno a thief with a big chin, a barbed nod to industry rumors about Jay's joke-stealing reputation, and a glimpse of Johnny's unfiltered view. What made the Carson-Leno rivalry remarkable was how Johnny balanced emotion with duty. Even though he disapproved, he never attacked Leno publicly or sabotaged NBC's choice. Instead, he let his actions in silence carry his message. This quiet defiance became one of Carson's trademarks, a man who mastered the art of restraint. He knew that protecting the institution mattered more than airing grievances, even when personal feelings ran deep. Chevy's turns on The Tonight Show fell flat, recalled a segment producer who had worked on several of his appearances. Talk show interviews depend on a shared rhythm, an exchange, not a solo act. Chase never seemed to grasp or respect that essential balance. He often appeared smug and dismissive, giving Carson little to work with. For Johnny, who valued making every guest feel at ease and every exchange feel alive, Chase posed an unusual obstacle. His lack of interest in genuine dialogue and indifference toward the format irritated Carson, who depended on guest cooperation to create great television. Worse still, Chase acted as if the entire format was beneath him, explained a director who had seen these awkward segments firsthand. There was a clear sense he looked down on late-night talk shows, even though he had once hosted one himself. That arrogance came across on camera, turning each appearance into something the audience and Carson dreaded. Carson's private comments about Chase revealed just how exasperated he was by the comedian's attitude. According to staffers who heard Johnny's uncensored remarks, he found Chase's personality especially grating. Carson's verdict, said one crew member, was simple. Chevy thinks being smug counts as charm. It doesn't. A writer from that era remembered how harsh that sounded coming from Johnny, who almost never criticized guests, even behind closed doors. What made his dislike of Chase stand out was that it shaped real professional choices, not just private complaints. Carson went as far as banning Chase from consideration as a guest host, an uncommon move for someone typically generous with that opportunity. Johnny made it clear, if he's sick, don't even suggest Chevy. That wasn't pettiness, it was a professional call. He believed Chase simply lacked the skill to handle the talk show environment, whether as guest or substitute host. Excluding him wasn't revenge, it was Carson's way of protecting the tone and consistency of the show. The situation underscored how Carson's standards defined his reactions to those around him. He could tolerate nervous or opinionated guests, even combative ones, but had no patience for performers who dismissed the collaborative nature of the show or treated it like their own act. Johnny believed deeply that The Tonight Show represented a specific craft deserving respect, recalled a longtime NBC executive. Guests didn't have to adore the structure, but they had to play by its rules. Chase didn't, and Carson saw no point in indulging someone who refused to value the format. Unlike some of Carson's grudges, this one never softened. Neither man sought reconciliation, and Chase's absence from The Tonight Show in later years stood as a quiet reminder of a rift that never healed. This cool professional distance revealed a core truth about Carson. Beneath his warm, unscreened charm was a man of high expectations and little forgiveness for arrogance disguised as talent. "I've thought a lot about this," one associate recalled. It connects to how Carson handled all his rivals, especially Howard Stern. Johnny Carson's clash with Howard Stern embodied two opposing philosophies of entertainment. Carson's poised, traditional style collided head-on with Stern's loud, boundary-pushing irreverence. Their feud reflected not just personal distaste, but two entirely different ideas of what broadcasting should stand for. Stern routinely mocked Carson as outdated, said a radio insider familiar with both men. It wasn't a one-time jab, it was a constant barrage meant to crown Stern as the new voice of rebellion, while painting Carson as the outmoded gatekeeper. Stern didn't stop at insults about age or relevance, he attacked the very foundation of Carson's work, claiming his carefully balanced interviews proved timidity, not professionalism. He ridiculed the show's safe humor and accused Carson of fearing unscripted truth, recalled a late-night producer from that era. Stern kept arguing that Carson's restraint masked insecurity, not craft. What made Stern's approach biting was how he framed his own vulgarity as bravery, as if his shock tactics were more honest than Carson's sophistication. It wasn't just taste, it was a moral verdict that labeled Johnny's professionalism as cowardice. Carson's reaction to these taunts spoke volumes. He never mentioned Stern publicly, said a longtime colleague. In the pre-social media age, Carson could simply stay silent, and he did, refusing to give Stern the attention he craved. He ignored the provocations completely, avoiding any tit-for-tat exchanges that might have made headlines but lowered his stature. Yet that composure didn't mean indifference. Insiders say Johnny had very strong opinions about Stern and despised his brand of entertainment. He loathed him, one Tonight Show writer admitted. To Carson, Stern embodied everything wrong with shock-based broadcasting, the confusion of cruelty with candor. Carson once summed up his view, according to a close producer. "Stern's not honest, he's just mean." That statement captured Carson's belief that good entertainment could be bold without being brutal. This difference went far beyond personality. It represented a turning point in media itself. Carson's universal, broadly appealing model was giving way to Stern's divisive, niche-driven approach. Johnny came from a time when hosts tried to unite viewers across backgrounds, said a media historian. Stern's goal, by contrast, was to split them, to make some fans obsessed and others outraged. Their mutual disdain symbolized not just dislike, but a philosophical standoff about entertainment's purpose. That divide made reconciliation impossible. Unlike other rivalries built on personal slights, this one came from unshakable values neither man would abandon. It wasn't just personal animosity, an industry veteran explained. It was two incompatible visions. Carson saw humor as elevation through wit. Stern saw it as revelation through shock. Admitting the other's validity would have betrayed their own identities. The Carson-Stern feud, therefore, stands as the most ideological of Johnny's rivalries. Less about ego, more about what television itself should mean. Beyond his major feuds, several lesser tensions hinted at Carson's deeper sensibilities. These smaller conflicts didn't carry hatred, but revealed what rubbed him the wrong way professionally. His complicated dynamic with fellow host Dick Cavett highlighted those subtleties. "He wasn't fond of Cavett's academic tone," said a network executive. It wasn't envy. Carson respected Cavett's sharp mind and interviewing style. What bothered him was the implied superiority, the suggestion that intellectual conversation was somehow more valuable than his brand of mass entertainment. That unease stemmed from Carson's awareness of class distinctions, the idea that his approachable Midwestern tone was viewed as less cultured than Cavett's Ivy League polish. The result was quiet distance rather than open hostility, but it never quite disappeared. Carson's attitude toward Arsenio Hall showed another side of his competitiveness. When Hall emerged in the late 1980s, Carson dismissed him as a short-lived fad, said a producer from the time. As Hall's younger audience grew, Carson's public response was silence, a strategic refusal to acknowledge the challenge. It was classic Carson: ignore rivals, maintain composure, and act unbothered. He didn't like Hall personally, but he doubted his staying power and saw no reason to engage with the hype. Carson's coolness toward Phil Donahue stemmed from taste, not temperament. Too heavy-handed and political for Johnny, recalled an associate. Carson thought talk shows should offer relief from the day's friction, not amplify it. Donahue's emotionally charged debates